Hi, Mel here. I'm an eating disorder therapist and writer and trainer, and I need to talk to you today about this new documentary that's come out. It's a three-part series called Fit for TV, and it's about The Biggest Loser. So, even if you haven't seen the documentary, most people know what The Biggest Loser was about. It's a horrible game show where people were treated absolutely terribly. The documentary is kind of there to prove that point, really, and how much the contestants were shouted and screamed at and just horribly abused by the host, and sort of made such a spectacle of, they really are like, this was made for sensationalism, this was made for TV, like that's what we were doing. So I think it's no, I'm not here to talk today about how awful it was. I think we know that already, and if we didn't, then this documentary has certainly helped raise that. I think what I'd also just like to talk about in this is how little eating disorders were talked about in relation to The Biggest Loser. In the documentary, they didn't have like a psychologist or a therapist or something to give that kind of take on it. They did have Aubrey Gordon, and I was really pleased to see her because she's one of my favourite authors and podcasters. And if you don't know Aubrey Gordon, go and check her out. She's under Your Fat Friend, and there's a documentary by her called by somebody else, but about her, called Your Fat Friend, and it's a documentary about fatness and weight and size and Aubrey and everything to do with that. It's really, really worth a watch. Anyway, Aubrey is in the documentary, which is, her voice is so important in that. But having listened to quite a lot of her podcast and read quite a lot of her stuff, I did really feel like there was a lot more that she could have added to that. It was almost like maybe it was edited in a way, or maybe it was a way that it wasn't so confronting, because it's still quite radical, I think, some of the ideas and the kind of body acceptance or fat acceptance movement. So it seems like a little bit of more palatable for a big audience kind of reason, but I was still pleased to have Aubrey's voice in there, really. And some of the former contestants, some of them have gained weight back as well, and talking about the experience of that and the experience of shame. What happens when you win The Biggest Loser, or you've been on The Biggest, even if you've been on it, you lose weight, and you're losing weight on national TV, and then later you just gain it all back. I mean, this is what happens all the time with weight loss, and it happens so often in binge eating cycles as well. So this is why I think it's really important to talk about eating disorders with this, and broader realm of disordered eating and eating distress, I think. Now, I'm not here to diagnose. I never diagnose anybody. It's not my position as a therapist. But I think that there might be something for a lot of contestants on The Biggest Loser that might have looked and felt a lot like disordered eating or eating distress. Certainly somebody in the documentary, they showed a clip of someone talking about secretive eating, which is part of it, where there's such a lot of stigma and shame around eating, and they're in a binge cycle. Potentially meaning they binge eat, then feel terribly guilty and all the shame afterwards, and then go back into a restriction or diet again and keep going around the same cycle. And The Biggest Loser was really just a bigger part. That was just a bigger part of that cycle where ultimately they're going to crash again. This time it's just a lot more public and it's a lot more shameful. I really feel for anyone who went on The Biggest Loser, just for all of that, and for the way that they were treated, the way that they were spoken to. Doesn't seem like anybody got any psychological support. I mean, I guess that wouldn't help ratings for TV, was it? It's not sensational to have therapy or even just some background support for being on a reality TV show, which should always be the case now because they seem intense. I would anticipate that quite a lot of people maybe going on there were struggling with eating in a way that might fall under a disordered eating spectrum, which might have actually been helped by psychological support. Certainly it isn't the best way at all to deal with any kind of eating distress, weight problem, body image problem, or whatever, by giving more shame and more punishment and more stigma, which is what The Biggest Loser was, basically. It was like you know, if as if fat people don't already have enough bullying and abuse and stigma and trauma that they have to go through in the world already, that then they're faced on this TV show where they've got these hosts, like, well, not the hosts, the trainers, you know, Bob and Gillian, screaming at them, telling them to not stop unless they throw up. I mean, this is absolutely terrible abuse. And the worst thing is that it's almost like it was fair game because they're fat people. We were just allowed to speak to them like that. But even worse, in that it was positioned as we're saving your life. We're actually doing this because we're helping you and we're saving you. And that is absolutely appalling. I was quite sad to see in this documentary actually that Bob doesn't, and the producers as well, don't seem to want to take any responsibility for how much this show caused us a lot of harm. It really, you know, added to fat phobia and weight stigma in society as well. I mean, I know that was there before, but things like this made it a lot worse, and there was real harm caused to some contestants and to a lot of the viewers watching the show as well. The amount of people that say that contributed so much to their disordered eating or their body image thoughts, you know. What's you know, I really believe, and I guess I'm biased because I'm a therapist, but I believe that if there is any problem with body image, weight, foods, whatever, is that it really a psychological approach should be taken. I mean, I know sometimes eating disorders are seen as being treatable in a medical fashion, and I think that's because sometimes medical intervention is really needed if somebody is very unwell. I like to think that perhaps if we had a more preventative way of working with it, then perhaps we wouldn't need that so much, because I do believe that eating disorders, disordered eating, all of that is more of a psychological, it has somewhat of other, it has like a biological, social, psychological, but I do believe that therapy and various kind of psychological treatments can help for these. Say treatment, I don't actually use the word treatment as a therapist, but I'm just saying that because it's so often talked about in that way. So, you know, I wish that people could recognize that actually what they're going through isn't their fault. It's not that they just don't have willpower. You know, I've often had people say to me, or when I realized that it was called binge eating, it's binge eating disorder, and that actually I have something, and there isn't just me not being able to control myself. It isn't just my fault with no willpower. It isn't just me being a terrible person. Sometimes having a name for it can kind of help. But realistically, a lot of people in our society, I think, wouldn't do that. You know, but sadly, but some people are able to go in to see a doctor and go, hey, I think I've got binge eating. Can I get some help from that? And the doctor's probably going to go, oh, okay, yeah, maybe like go through this charity or go here or go there. And they might get the right help or support. But realistically, people aren't doing that. There's a lot of undiagnosed eating disorders, disordered eating, because people don't term it that way. They go, I just hate myself. I can't. I've got no willpower. I need to lose weight. I'm disgusting. And this is the kind of narrative instead. Whereas it's actually that they've probably got a really difficult relationship with food, have very negative thoughts about their body, and this is where, you know, this is where that help I think is possible. There is a bit of the documentary where Bob says something about if you struggled with your weight, then you'll always have that monkey on your back, which I don't think is a particularly inspirational thing to say to people. But I do think I think there's some truth in there. If we're going for a hard-hitting truth, it might be that if you're someone in a larger body and you've been fat, and I say that as a descriptive word, for most of your life, all of your life, like I have, this was kind of my realization in this as well, as when you're if you're continue to be fat, you'd probably have to do something very drastic to not be, and that might actually be more detrimental to your health in the same way that the Biggest Loser was, and the fact that losing weight that quickly, running on a treadmill till you throw up, like none of these things, none of that was about health. You cannot spin that to be about health at all. That is definitely detrimental to your health. So I think a lot more of this is about learning sort of kindness for yourself, learning acceptance. Some people will not be able to be thin. And I think you can find a lot more peace with things when you kind of go, okay, so maybe I'm not going to be thin. What do I really want? If this is about health, it doesn't have to be about weight. I think there's some things that people could do if they want to help, if they want to work on their health. Well, what about sleep, stress, mental health? Like, the number on the scales doesn't have to be anything to do with that. For people who want to do movement and exercise, that can help your health. You can do that. You don't have to have a number on the scales to validate that for you. And I think it's important to say as well that lots of people just can't be healthy. There's a lot of people who don't have health in their capacity. They might be elderly, they might have chronic illnesses, they might just be dealing with all sorts of things. Human bodies are fragile. You just do what you can with them. And actually, even the healthiest people sometimes will end up having their health problems as well. I think there's a lot of fear behind this. I mean, you hear people say on The Biggest Loser, and I've heard people say before, of just being absolutely terrified that they're going to eat themselves to death, that fatness is going to kill them. And that's where this idea comes from: The Biggest Loser is saving my life, or this, Bob and Gillian are saving my life. I can see why they're saying that, but that's not the case. We don't know if that was ever going to be the case, because actually what they've put them through is a lot of psychological distress, a lot of physical distress and impact on their body. And I would think it's very unlikely that they did, in fact, help them at all in that. It's just on a weight loss success measure, they could sort of tick the box, but we know that a lot of people from The Biggest Loser also just gained weight later on as well, and the psychological distress and the shame that this causes. So I think overall, what I'm saying is, I'm often talking about how disordered eating disorders are very little talked about, and they're not. I think they go unnoticed in society, particularly in people in larger bodies. And on that note as well, I think it's not just that people on The Biggest Loser would have had binge eating or a so-called eating too much, or an overeating. I don't like these terms. That's why I'm like, oh, what term do I use? It's not necessarily that it's about those kind of eating disorders. I think it's just as likely that someone on The Biggest Loser could have had a restrictive eating disorder, and that might normally fall under, say, atypical anorexia, which is when somebody has the food behaviors, eating behaviors of anorexia, so restriction, but without them actually being underweight. And I think that is probably hugely prevalent in our society, and no one's talking about it, and no one sees it, and they don't see it in themselves, and they're just going, they need to lose weight, and then the world is going, you need to lose weight, and then TV shows are going, lose weight no matter what. And it really showed it, didn't it, with the woman who went too far, Rachel, I think her name was. That's just, that's appalling. I mean, that is just like a whole TV show of them screaming at her, like, lose weight no matter what, lose weight no matter what. And then she does. And they're like, oh no, too far. I mean, that's just it reminds me of the book Body Positive Power by Jayne Crabbe, who talks about her experience of an eating disorder, of everyone in the world wanting to lose weight, and then she does, and then suddenly it's like a switch that flicks, and you're just like, oh no, now it's an eating disorder. Also, shame on you for that, for letting yourself get that bad, for taking it too far. What can we do as people? You can't win, can you? Well, you can win, actually, because I think what this is really about, and I don't take it lightly, because I spent many, many years doing this, but more about unpacking and unlearning what we're meant to do, and all the stuff that society tells us about thin being healthy, and then learning ways in which to, I wouldn't say love or like your body, because that might not be possible for some people, but at least just think it's okay, or respect it for now, or just at least it kind of feel the value in looking after yourself in a way that is possible for you and isn't based on weight. Because it doesn't have to all be based on weight, because that's when it becomes punishment and shame, whereas really it should be the opposite. We need the opposite of what they do on The Biggest Loser. We need kindness, compassion. This is why therapy and a therapeutic relationship can help with that, with somebody who understands, because you're going to be able to talk through the pain of this, the pain of experiencing weight trauma, of being in a larger body. That's what I mean by being in trauma in the world. The stigma, the abuse, the bullying that people have had from people, the treatment of fat people is so difficult, and that's not your fault. That's not my fault. That the solution to that isn't lose weight. The solution isn't like, I've been treated terribly by everybody, I need to go and lose weight to make them stop. Like, no, that's their responsibility to not do it. You don't, the victim doesn't have to change. The bully has to change their behavior. The culture has to change. So ultimately, I'm kind of glad this documentary is out there. I think they could have done more. I think there's a lot more that probably should have been in it. But I'm glad that at least everybody seems to kind of look back on The Biggest Loser, and apart from Bob, it seems, and the producers, the rest of us are looking back on it going, thank God that doesn't exist anymore. Okay, thanks for listening. If you want to read more of my blog posts and things, oh, I will just say one last thing. There is a part of the documentary where someone mentions food noise and weight loss injections, and I just have to, every time I hear that, I have to highlight that we really need to talk about what food noise is and not just say it as a term like, oh, stopping food noise. Oh, yes, well done. So I've written a deep dive blog on weight loss injections and food noise. I've also written other things on weight loss injections and disordered eating and body image and various other things on my website. So go and check them out. There's also various bits of training and stuff that I've done in connection to those. And if you're interested in having therapy, or you know anyone who is, then also I work online